Kia ora koutou. Fantastic to be here. For those of you who get a little confused now that we have two infrastructure bodies in the world, we're delighted to be here. We represent the peak industry body, so 140 members. Our two most recent members, I'm very pleased to say, is the Obstruction Commission, which is a model that happens in Australia that the whole industry gets together. And also MB. So we have a number of government departments in there as well because of the procurement focus. But we represent the glue that tries to collaborate and bring the industry to get together around events like this. So brilliant to be here and talking about a future focus. I wanted to call out Whakatohea. That was an absolutely fantastic story. And I think we need to see an awful lot more of community response, a 100-year vision. And if we're here talking about looking ahead, I think we could probably look right in front of us and scale those bottom-up responses to equal the top-down responses that we always talk about. So, how do I move this thing? I don't do that. This one? Yeah. Perfect, thank you. So, our vision is that all New Zealanders enjoy the benefits of world-class infrastructure, but infrastructure is only a derivative of what we want to be. So, who do we want to be, I think is the first question, because you can answer that with infrastructure or skills or investment in many, many different ways, but who do we want to be is actually what I'll be talking about a little bit as well. We've, through Stephen Selwood's leadership, we've been around the world. We've had many, many overseas delegations, and I'll talk about what we've got coming up. But we see consistently these 5 pillars. If you want to have world-class infrastructure, you must have these 5 elements in order to get great outcomes. Minister Jones talked about interdependencies. You must have all of these 5 pillars together, but the first and the biggest and the boldest and the most required is number 1, is your vision, is the leadership, because that leadership and that governance has the ability to change the system, and we're here for the system, and that system and all of us working together to create brilliant outcomes. So I'll talk to that model as we go through. This is some desktop research that we have done that we're about to throw over to our friends in the Infrastructure Commission as they undertake their stocktake of what New Zealand currently has. Our Office of the Auditor General has recently gone into the water space, and a really common theme they're finding, again to Jaap's point, is we don't have the data. We don't know what we've got. It's a bit hard for us to do that, maintain the 70% when we don't know what we've got. But this is what we think we have. We think that, and this is the assets only, that central government has 137 billion, local government 114 billion, and private 53. So in percentage terms, that's 42% for central government and 38% for local government. So who of you knew that they were pretty much on even footing in terms of what we receive from government? And that's government with a capital G, but we see them as 2 parts. Also, quite interesting that the private sector is 18%. In other countries in the world, that is a much, much larger percentage. They look to set regulation, and then they get the private sector to bring their capital so that we all enjoy the benefits. We've had a real aversion to the private sector being involved, or I see my friends from the public sector here. You know, we have the super fund, we have ACC, we have iwi investors as well. They have a part to play in this as well. But on the right-hand side is really the real issue that I see, is that the way that we split up the revenue in order to pay things, what we call the funding in order to repay the financing. Funding is the income that you get in from your salary. Financing is the mortgage from the BNZ or your equity. There's a difference between funding and financing, but in this you see that the local government only have 10% of the share. So with the Provincial Growth Fund, which is a fantastic example of doing some infrastructure things well, we're taking that 90 cents in the dollar and we're recycling it into areas that otherwise the Aportiki District Council couldn't fund. And this is a great example of the way that we have to work. What Darryl Lee was talking about collaboration is the new way forward. In our messy and complex, multiple choice world, the only way to do things well is to bring together people around these problems. That's our traffic light in the middle, red, amber, green. You see a pretty consistent theme there. The stuff that's working well is private. I'm not here to say that private has all the answers, but that's the area where we've spent most of our time on making sure our systems work. When was the last time you complained about your lines company bill or even knew what it was? Now, they've got problems coming up as well because, as Jaap will say, technology gives you your Kodak moment 2 to 3 years away. But the sectors that are performing the best are those that are furthest away from the political landscape. I'll leave you with that. Mixed ownership models and so on really can help to get better outcomes. So have a little look at that. And off the back of that model, we've identified that we've got 3 really critical flashing red priorities in New Zealand. So there's $1.2 trillion worth of housing stock in New Zealand. Housing is performing incredibly poorly. We're the second most expensive country in the world for housing. It's vastly inequitable. And the next one, mobility, is transport and urban water. So all of that really loads up to our urban environments. 87% of Kiwis live in urban environments, according to the Department of Stats. So we had to choose where we'd focus. We think we can't focus on more than 5 things, so those 3 policy areas are up there. And then we'll talk about how these come together. But I think another critical point that the Minister made, we took our board to Tokerau, Whangarei, probably about 3 weeks ago. We had a presentation from the Northland DHB, which absolutely shocked our board. And I know there's a health system review going on. But there was an absolutely appalling indictment on outcomes for the people of that area. What was really interesting was that for 3% of New Zealand's population, 10% of the national road fatalities happen in Northland. Yet there was no forum that NZTA was able to talk to or co-invest alongside the DHB for outcomes. So the famous all-of-government approach is very, very hard if it's top-down from Wellington. But as the Minister said, perhaps we need more regional scale. There are some fantastic local councils, but for the ability to scale an infrastructure, you need scale. So we'll be talking to you about building regions, not about building territorial local authorities, which is a terrible name by itself. This is what our 140 members told us last year. 98% of people supported city or regional deals, and I'll come back to that. And 93% said that they wanted increased local government powers. It is a very, very hard thing for a central government person to give up power to local government. We are the envy of the world in that we have some fantastic transparency and some great government. We consistently get great ratings in there. And yet we also have this curious thing that some of our outcomes, whether it's mental health or child poverty or the state of our housing or our water infrastructure, is actually performing incredibly poorly. So it's our job to be upfront about what is it in our system that is failing us. City or regional deals, our friends from Australia are here. We will take a delegation to Australia to look at Australia. They do 13 of these. And I'll explain it further on, but effectively a share of that 90 cents in the dollar, the central government taxes, is reinvested in partnership with the local government in a larger region around a spatial plan. We heard a lot about spatial planning. It's a collaborative tool for pulling us together so that the central government needs around NZTA meets the local needs for local iwi, for communities, and also for council infrastructure. We got 84% support for the New Zealand Auckland Commission, which we're delighted about because we campaigned on this for many years. It's vitally, vitally important, and we're a huge supporter of Dr. Bollard and the team, and we think that this sort of environment is a brilliant way to start. Great to see some support for the Provincial Growth Fund. Probably looking for a bit more information there, Shane, and only just over the half on our transport policy. Bit of a struggle on the urban growth agenda. I just want to put up front that Infrastructure New Zealand is a very strong supporter of the government's urban growth agenda. If you look at our infrastructure space, it's all in the urban space that we're failing. We're strong supporters there, but I think we heard when Dean was talking about the RMA panel, that we've got a really critical thing that at the moment the NIMBYs are up against the YIMBYs. And I think we've got a really critical thing that we need to work through, that we, since the days of Muldoonsism and we've deregulated the economy, we as voters value a non-interventionist government. Actually, most of the problems in the world require the government to act. The market has failed in water, it has failed in housing, it has failed in mental health. We need to reward people that have ambition, which is tough in an MMP and a 3-year horizon, to use agencies that have a 30-year horizon, or even iwi that have a 100-year horizon to help us find the solutions. 98% said that water needs to change. It is time to change. It's 3.5 years since we started killing people. It is just a basic human right. There are up to 1 million Kiwis who drink water that isn't fit for UN health standards. That's appalling in a country like ours. And it's really interesting. We have Wellington Water as one of our members. We're here to represent an independent view. It's really unhelpful to see city councillors and central government and Wellington Water pointing at each other rather than accepting accountability for moving forward. We think that the answer is in CCOs. Wellington Water isn't as strong as Watercare's CCO is, but there's a real responsibility to get going on that. Construction sector accord, 71% that Construction Sector and Infrastructure Commission will help us with the problems that we have in that space. This is a busy slide, but the first thing I will take is that we need a national vision. And that vision should not be an infrastructure vision. It should be put ourselves forward 30 years or 50 years and say what sort of lives are our children going to live? I have a 17-year-old. When he is my age, what sort of environmental, social, cultural and economic opportunities are they going to have? Are we going to set the bar that we want to be in the top quartile of the OECD for income? Do we want to be, and I'll paraphrase, dirty dairying or the greenest country in the world? These are choices that we need to go to the community on and set that vision, because without that vision, we have disconnected silos. We've found 845 government agencies. They're not working with a central vision yet. Business has a vision, as does local government. I'll keep moving so I can see this. So we're taking people off to Ireland this year. They have a 2040 vision. It is done by them. This is that's Scotland's one. I don't want you to read it, but the point is that as a citizen, you can go on there and know what your government stands for a 30-year period, and you can see progress against it. A Gallup poll of 500,000 people said that if we opened our doors tomorrow, then we would have a population of 11.5 million people, 333% more skilled than we are today, and 222% younger than today. So I thank our Infrastructure Minister for opening a population debate. I absolutely think we need to have a population debate. But I think that in between ambition and the way that people experience growth today, which is as a cost, that's because we're not investing in our infrastructure systems. The system is failing. And actually our immigration policy is fueling the fire of that, but it is a symptom. It is not the reason we have failing systems. We see that the construction sector accord is a model for what we call building regions, and I will mention that shortly. But if you look down the bottom left, there are things that the industry must do. And then there's shared stuff, and then there's government-led. So the final thing I want to say is in terms of building regions, what we need to do is we need to scale up local government. And there's a massive advantage for us here. What this model basically says is that if we put $100 of government money into a partnership in the Waikato, that the Waikato could go and borrow $250 on top. That would release 7,000 sections. We'd then build homes, and in total there'd be $2.5 billion worth of activity. The $100 million that the Crown puts in gets $367 million of GST alone from that activity. So I think we're in an environment of shared responsibility. Collaboration needs to happen in order for this to come together. So I could talk all day, I can't, but I think that in terms of building regions, we need to work in a new way, we need to work collaboratively, and we've got to set our vision high. So I'd love to chat to any of you over lunch. Thank you.